And who wrote that email, Frederick Baba, joins us now. Fred, good afternoon to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So it's been a really fascinating email to read, but then to see the traction it's gotten, I'm sure that's been of interest to you as well. I guess the theme that comes out of it, as has been reported, is that you appreciate so many of the encouraging words that some of your colleagues and some of the business community have been saying, but you'd like to see more. You'd like to see specific action as well.
Yeah, I mean, so on the one hand, I think that the response has been positive, and I think part of that is that there are a number of people who just were not aware that these things were actually happening, or they didn't think that these things would happen to someone like me. And obviously there are like class implications in that, right? People assume, oh, well, Fred went to MIT, Fred works at Goldman Sachs, he's a managing director. Obviously the bad things that we hear about racism don't apply to him because he's special in some way. And I think one of the things that has been really interesting is my email, and I think a lot of the conversations and protests that are happening around the country are starting to build awareness. And I think from awareness, we get to people actually engaging with these difficult topics of race and eventually moving towards advocacy, where you see people saying, I personally am going to stand against some of these racist policies. I'm going to stand against injustice in our society. And that is where I think more people need to get to. But I think to the extent that people have made that first step, it's been really encouraging to see.
As part of raising the awareness, Fred, for those that haven't read your op-ed in Bloomberg or your email, I mean, what stood out to me was that, you tracked the cases over the United States, the ones that we had all heard of, but also talked about some personal experiences you've dealt with yourself, like what happened in Chicago. So talk about what happened there.
Yeah, so I had an experience where I was leaving an event that I had gone to with some of my friends, and I was walking to the subway in the north side of Chicago. Obviously, Chicago is a fairly segregated city, and two police officers approached me and said that they had had reports of a black male in shorts and a T-shirt stealing from some of the residences in the area. And obviously, because there were not very many black people in the vicinity and I was black in people's perceptions, they assumed that I was that person. And then I tried to explain to them that that was ridiculous and that their description was extremely vague and that I was being profiled and that there were all of these reasons why this person would not be me. And I tried to talk about where I went to school and where I worked. And at the end of the day, the thing that started to dawn on me was that the way that they were perceiving me was, this is a black person in an area where we don't normally see black people, where we have been told that a crime has been committed, and not, this is a trader at a firm here in our city that is probably affluent and probably would not have committed this crime. And I think for a lot of black people across corporate America, across this country, you are going to have these experiences where you realize that the way that someone is responding to you is potentially a function of your race. And I think the thing that's really difficult is that sometimes it's going to be very explicit and very racist, and you'll be able to say for certain, this thing is racist. And then other times it is not clear, and it is probably racist, but it's not necessarily that someone is thinking about it or fully aware of it. Like my interaction with these police officers, where they got extremely physical with me, they probably weren't even processing the inherent racism and like structural issues around them, saying, I have seen a black person, and although my evidence is extremely shaky, it is clearly this person that is standing in front of me, right? And so I think the thing that we need to understand is that there are a lot of issues in like structural racist like embeddings into our society, for lack of a better term. And part of it is policing, obviously, and that's one of the things that our society is coping with and protesting right now. But it's not just policing, it's incarceration, it's what communities and what people have access to social institutions and quality healthcare and public transportation and good jobs. Like there are all of these things that affect people of color in the United States, and they impact how we perceive them, how we treat them, like whether or not they're able to like fully engage in and benefit from our society. And that is really the undertone, I think, of a lot of the frustration that we've seen play out. But I think on the positive note, I think that there is a lot of solidarity that has been developing out of this. And as people are becoming more aware that these things are happening and being capable of engaging with these topics and having conversations with their children and feeling excited about donating to these causes and going to protest marches. I do think that progress is happening and that progress is being made, but we do still live in a country where a black person can be killed by a police officer extrajudicially, and nothing will happen for several weeks or several months until people take to the streets, right? So on the one hand, I think that progress is being made and a good conversation is being had. But on the other hand, like, my experience is not unique for black people in the United States. My experience isn't unique for black people at Goldman. It's not even unique for black MDs at Goldman, right? And so these are common themes and experiences where people of color are going to be harassed on the basis of the color of their skin. And we as a society are now starting to deal with that, and hopefully in a positive way.
Fred, I wanted to ask about one particular sentence from what you wrote, which was, quote, "A common bit of feedback from our junior colleagues is while our firm expresses a commitment to equality and social justice at the top, they don't necessarily see support from their direct managers." I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on that theme of your email in particular.
Absolutely. I mean, so if you think about the current makeup of corporate America, both at the C-suite and then also on the way down, if you are a black person in many companies across the industry and across the United States, it's quite likely that the person you report to is not going to be a black person. And race is a topic that has a storied and painful history in the United States. And so that's already a very difficult topic for people to engage with in the best of times, and particularly around some of these extremely troubling and traumatic killings that we've seen over the last several months. And so I think that there were a number of junior people who weren't sure how they could have that conversation with their manager, if that was okay, if that would be perceived as weakness or perceived in some negative light. And so, and I kind of alluded to this somewhat in my email, I was trying to write an email that would create space for people to have that conversation, and also create space for managers to feel like they could engage on these topics and properly support the black people that report to them. Because I think that for a lot of white people in the United States, because this is an extremely difficult topic, many of them choose not to engage with it because you have this concern about, am I going to say the wrong thing? Is it going to be misconstrued? Am I going to be offensive and in some way cause more damage than if I had said nothing? But the problem with not saying anything is that you are implicitly allowing the current state of the world to continue. And that, I think, people are coming to realize is unacceptable.
Fred Baba, thank you very much for joining us.